Hi everyone, this is the breakdown video for McMaster Health Sciences question 2B on the 2020-2021 application. The question we're going to help answer for you is how do I best answer the education question? This is what we're calling this question. And the question is, in her 1954 essay, The Crisis in Education, Hannah, I'm just going to call her Hannah A, okay? Says, education is the point at which we decide whether we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it. And that's the key sentence there. We love the world enough to assume responsibility for it. How does your view compare to Hannah's, Hannah A's? Let's review the checklist. So again, we want to really focus on creativity, uniqueness, differentiation from others. What degree your response gives the reader insight into who you are, your strengths, your values, your passions, personality traits, life experiences, extracurriculars. We want you to deep dive on this thought, on this response. We want you to think about it deeply. Ask yourself why and so what multiple times so that you can really arrive at that depth of thought. So use this evaluation checklist to self-evaluate your essays that you produce. How you approach this essay is really going to determine the uniqueness of your answer. So you can approach it in a way of doing a lot of research on this essay and on the author, and then formulating an opinion on it based on that. And then you're just going to be really in the crowd here. You're going to be the 90% of people who you're going to have the same sort of responses as all of them. But if you are the blue here and you do a little bit of research in context and understanding of the essay and on the author and what she was what her purpose of writing the essay was, what the main points were, and then you use that to formulate your own beliefs and life experiences and you tie those into there, that's where you're really going to be the differentiated 10% that stand out and that get those acceptances that you're all really, really looking for. So first, let's look at some context on this essay. So this isn't a book, actually, it's an essay. It's part of a book that she wrote. I forget the name of the book, but the main points she was trying to make were these. Number one was education is about teaching what is, introducing students to the world that exists today. So that's one of the parts of education that she believes in. Teaching students what is. So you're born into this world, what exists in this world as it is right now today. And then bestowing the responsibility for these students to love and care for this world. So we want to empower students as teachers, as educators, to ensure that students actually love this world. They're graduating into a world that they love and appreciate and want to make a positive impact in. She also mentions or education is about teaching people to love the world. So that's similar to that second point here. And then just said a different way, she says, education is about assuming responsibility to teach others the world as it is, even though it won't be valid. So even though we are teaching students the world as it is today, we know that it will very likely not be valid anymore after they've learned it. But it's important for students to learn the world as it is today, but then at the same time make possible of what students can bring into this world. And that's that whole concept of empowering students to think about what they can bring into the world, what they can, where they can impact, what issues they can solve, what careers they can go into. And that's my interpretation of this essay in a nutshell. You can do some more research on this essay. We'll link to the actual essay in the video description below. There's also actually a department that Hannah A is named after at Bard College or Baird College. And we'll link to that below as well, and some blogs that they've written on her pieces of work and her thoughts on education, which might be helpful for you to develop more context on. But remember, don't deep dive too much into the essay and into the author. Actually, I did not even read the entire essay. We want to make sure that you only have enough context that you can formulate your own opinions about this, okay? But if I were to visually represent what Hannah's view is of education, it would be this. It would be, on one side, teaching how the world works today and also where we came from. So it's important to understand, as a young person coming into this world, some history on where we've come from, so that we don't make the same mistakes twice. And that's not necessarily just learning about history. That's learning about the history of economics, the history of life, and how our world has generated and become that. And then also on the other side, it's helping students prepare for the decision of what they want to do about the world. And that's what we're saying about this whole bestowing responsibility for them to love and care about the world. And so Hannah's view is that education is this. It's this state that society has reached when we've accomplished both of these things. Now, on one of the blogs on this Hannah A Center for Politics and Humanities department, they actually go in and define what education is and where it came from. So the word education, I didn't even know this before researching this essay, and I would actually say that I know a lot about the education space. It's from the Latin word educare, and to educate means leading in or drawing out, leading a child into the world, of drawing her into the world. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by this drawing out concept, but leading in, I definitely understand. Maybe drawing out means allowing them to go into the world afterwards. So leading them into the world, and then the graduation process, making sure that they have enough skills, tools, etc. to graduate. And maybe that's that concept of drawing out. And another quote from that blog is, parents educate their children by drawing them out of their private selves and into the world of their family, their community, and their society. So parents are really helping you be educated by drawing you out into particular areas of the world, whether that's engaging with family, working on community initiatives, or just into society in different areas, sports, other extracurriculars. So that definition might help. Another thing that I found useful was looking at the limitations and agreements with Hannah A's arguments, at least in how I see them. So I have some limitations as how I view her argument, or her belief of education, and then I agree with a couple as well. So in terms of limitations, it's a very ideological view. It's a very high-level view, very theoretical. So it's an ideology. It isn't necessarily something that can be achieved very easily. It's hard to implement, which is sort of the same, or some components of similarities with the ideological approach. It's hard to implement. How do you implement something where it's the point at which we decide to love the world enough to assume responsibility for it? That's a very difficult concept to implement. If you were to give that to the Minister of Education or even to a teacher, how do they actually put that into practice in their classrooms at the school board or even curriculum level? It's also difficult to measure. That's really important these days. We want to be able to measure, since we have such easy access to data. We want to be able, and people, we want to be able to measure the effectiveness, the efficacy of education. And if there's a desired outcome for education, we want to be able to measure that. And I guess we could ask maybe a question: to a student, do you love the world? But I'm not sure how, in this particular sentence, how we could measure this view of education. It's the point at which we decide whether we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it. How do we measure that as a society? How do we measure if we've reached that point? It's very difficult to measure. And it's also not, education isn't necessarily a point in time. And that's what this sentence somewhat alludes to, that it's a point in time. But education is really this ongoing journey, and it's not a goal. It's not an outcome. It's not a a goal or this destination that we've arrived as a society. It's not a point. It is a continual, ongoing journey that we need to continually develop and grow into. And also, this view is really limited to more primary and secondary levels. So when she wrote this in the 50s, college and university education wasn't as expected, or it wasn't as common as it is today. Now, back then, it sounded like her focus for this essay was really on K to 12. And this view of this sort of societal view of education really is limited to the public school system in many ways, and in primary and secondary. Whereas today, education is so much broader than just primary and secondary school. We have obviously college and university, but even after that, there's this component of lifelong learning that, as an educator myself, is a very, very important and big trend, big focus today. Whether you're 50, whether you're 70 years old, whether you're 30 years old, you want to continue to be educated. You want to continue to grow and learn, whether that is about your job, whether that is about learning a particular skill, whether that is about being educated on anything from politics to building your self-awareness. The lifelong learning is really what we're all about today. And this essay, or at least this statement, really feels limited to the primary and secondary level. Now, on the agreement standpoint, it actually theoretically checks out. I thought about this a lot. And the theory, as we define here, actually really checks out. If education met these two things, then we would be at a really great place. Now, I do believe that you need to teach students more than just how the world works today and where we came from, but this whole concept of preparing them for what they want to do sort of includes, okay, well, we actually need to train them on some other things in order for them to be prepared for what they want to be able to do in the world as well. So it theoretically works. It also, I like how it places responsibility on society rather than particular groups of people. How she's formed it, or how she's stated it, says we decide, we love the world. It's like society, it's like civilization. We decide that reaching this state of education is at the point where we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it. If we achieve that state, then we as a society have succeeded almost, rather than focusing on teachers or focusing on parents or focusing on students or other specific groups of people. It's very all-encompassing, and I actually like that. I agree with that this is a societal, this is a really societal thing that we all need to be invested in education. And you could take another stance on that education is you should take ownership of it as yourself. When you graduate from university, this whole concept of lifelong learning is really about you taking action and ownership of your educational goals, and that's more placing that responsibility on you rather than on society. Another thing I like about it is her definition really allows us to see a continuation of our world with good education. So education is the point at which we decide whether we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it. If we're, basically what she's saying is, if we arrive at a place where we're educating people well, then we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it. If we love the world enough to assume responsibility for it, then other people that we're educating are going to love the world as well, and there's just going to be a continual love for the world. And you can interpret that as basically our society is going to continue to exist if we're able to educate people well, if we're able to reach this state that she defines as education. So here's some thought starters to get you started. I think that you should really develop your own unique view of what education is. And that's really what we're trying to help you do, is think have these thought starters and help you understand how to disaggregate questions and break them down so that you can develop your own unique view. And that's really how you're going to stand out, as I mentioned in the checklist. You want a unique and creative stance on this. And here is a way that you can actually get to that. So we have some words here, and then we have some beginnings of the sentence here. So what you can do is combine them. So you can say education is the process of learning, or education is the right to advancement, or you can say education is the solution for issues, or it's the foundation of independence. Use this to formulate some different sentences and see which one really resonates with you, and explore that a little bit deeper and expand on that and develop your own unique view. I'd like you to create a statement in the same way that Hannah has on a view of education, and that's really important so that you can actually effectively compare and contrast your view to hers. We'll also link in the video notes below to a variety of blogs and podcasts and other resources that you can read up on to stimulate your view of education. Here are some of the world's top thinkers on education, and it's helped stimulate my view and grow my perspective of what education is, and hopefully it will help you do that as well for you. So here's a template that we're going to go through. It's very simple, actually. This question is fairly difficult, but the structure, the logical structure and how we communicate your response is very simple. And of course, we follow the same communication structure that we teach, the answer first communication structure, where you're answering the question directly, and then you're giving a main reason and then supporting arguments underneath that. So here's the template framework that we suggest. You'll give your answer up front, so you answer the question, summarize how your view of education compares to Hannah's view in just 2 sentences. I want you to just focus 2 sentences on this. Pick out a certain component or characteristic of her view and whether you agree or disagree with it. And so these components can be here. I'd like you to list out your limitations and agreements as well. And you can pull out that certain component and mention it in that first paragraph, which shouldn't be more than 200 characters. So you can say, I agree with Hannah's view because it theoretically works, or it places responsibility on society. Whereas you can also take a disagreement standpoint. So I want you to answer the question whether you agree or disagree, or how your view compares to Hannah's, and just give a little bit more for the reader to chew on about your view in particular. Not much, no more than 2 sentences, but that's it. And then this is the real meat of this essay. I want you to explain your answer above, focusing on the key reason or reasons. I would highly recommend you focus on 1 to 2 reasons behind your view, why it's the same or different than Hannah's. Remember to aim for uniqueness and personal insight here. What can you tell about yourself through this view without appearing boastful or doing some modest brag? So for instance, if you wrote an education essay and you scored for this essay contest and you won that essay contest, I don't necessarily want you to say, this is my view of education and I wrote this essay and I submitted it into a contest and it won first place. That's not necessarily going to come across as positive to the admissions reviewers, the supplementary application reviewers. These are very, very highly successful, high-achieving students who are reviewing your essays, and they're not going to be that impressed with these types of accomplishments. They're going to see it as appearing boastful or this modest brag, which doesn't come across well. So you have to find a nice balance here in showing personal insight, maybe not necessarily for accomplishments or achievements, but maybe for things about you, your values, your life experiences, your view and beliefs about the world, your background and where you've come, that kind of thing. And then you go into supporting arguments. By the way, the concise reasons, this should be about 550 characters, so a lot of devotion here, and then some supporting arguments. So as you can see here, the supporting arguments, In the same way, we want to expand on your key reasons, and you want to expand on your reasons with the most compelling 1 to 3 arguments. That's 1 to 3 arguments that support your reason above. We want to demonstrate the depth of thinking here. Demonstrate your depth of thinking, that you are willing to think deeply about these topics and ideas in much greater detail and exploration than 90% of other people. Because, that 8 to 10% of people applying to this program are going to get admitted. So you need to think more deeply than 90% of these people. And that means asking the question, why, or so what about these arguments, and making sure that they're very powerful and very compelling. So I want to challenge you on your thinking there. And then the last part of this essay is very simple. It's just tying it back to the answer, a simple conclusion back to your view and Hannah's view. No more than 2 sentences here, so around 200 characters as well. So that's it. Hopefully that helps. There will be an essay example in the next day or so that covers this framework. Use this framework as much as you feel it is useful to you. It's a great way to structure your essay, and hopefully these ideas and thought starters help you. Thanks so much, and good luck.